Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Rich Allen and Jeremy Smith. There's a bit of chill hitting the UK at the moment, so let's warm you up with what other than another topsy-turvy Ligue weekend. But before we get out the hot water bottles for you all, here's the week's headlines. Friday began with an interesting clash between Strasbourg and Montpellier that very quickly became very uninteresting indeed, as it ended up scoreless without too much of note in the game. In Saturday's early match, Toulouse came from behind to draw 3-3 with Monaco. A Ronnie Lopez double either side of Ibrahim Sangare's strike, along with Jovicic's finish, gave the champions a 3-1 lead, but a controversial penalty decision that led to Leonardo Jardim asking for VAR to be implemented now, gave Lee Vialet a route back into the game, and Yaya Sanogo scored the equaliser with 3 minutes to play. In the multiplex, Angers earned a vital 3 points away to Lille. Ex-Angers man Nicolas Pepe looked to have stole a point with a late equaliser for the hosts, but Carl Tokyo Kambe's second ensured that they would rise above their hosts, who drop into the relegation places. As for their other relegation rivals, Amiens grabbed all 3 points in a gutsy 1-0 victory at Nantes, while Troyes sank to a 2-0 defeat at Rennes, as Dijon won their 7th home game out of 8 as they dispatched Caen 2-0. On a jam-packed Sunday, Bordeaux and Nice did not get us off to the greatest of starts with a 0-0 draw at the Matmut Al-Antique. In the Rhone Derby later on, Mathieu Debuchy popped up in stoppage time in order to earn a 1-1 draw against Lyon. That's the 6th time now this season that the hosts have dropped points from winning positions and are now winless in 5 in their last 5 Ligue 1 games. On Sunday night, Paris Saint-Germain almost went Super Saiyan, you might say, as they cruised to a comfortable 3-0 win over Marseille. Kylian Mbappe, Edin Cavani, and Rolando's own goal were the difference, but the headlines were stolen by Neymar, who was stretched off with an ankle injury just 10 days before their crucial second leg tie against Real Madrid. And that's all for now. But for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with Le Classique. Not intentionally rhyming there, but I like to add a little bit of flair at least, which wasn't quite the enthralling affair we'd hoped for, Rich. Did it feel like PSG weren't really forced out of third gear last night?
Yeah, exactly that. I've been championing Marseille, it feels, of late. And so coming into this, I was expecting that, they as we saw in the first match late last year, I think I questioned whether the PSG players really got the importance of this game. Marseille got it in the fixture at the Velodrome. So I was really hoping that we'd get a Marseille side that could be out of the blocks quickly, would look to really press PSG early on. We've seen once or twice this season what happens with teams that can do that is they can ruffle PSG. That wasn't really the case. It seemed to be the sort of timid Marseille side that it seems like we haven't seen that for quite a while. So it was a little surprised to see that return, but it was a game where the big name players failed to perform. Thauvin, I have praised him immensely of late, but he was anonymous. Payet was anonymous, and we saw those defensive frailties. So PSG really didn't have to try too hard. Maybe a 3-goal margin was perhaps flattering them a little bit. But it was for what is a very, very big game with importance for both sides. It was a game that PSG really, really were rarely under any kind of serious pressure.
Yeah, and Jeremy, we spoke before this really on a couple of our shows, both the normal one and our preview show, thinking that especially this game and the Le Classique that's coming in a couple of days' time as well in the Coupe de France as well. It feels like they were real tests for Paris Saint-Germain to try some different things ahead of that second leg against Real Madrid in 10 days' time. Was this really a good enough test for them for that kind of level? It's a difficult one because everyone's obviously mentioning that a lot of games in Ligue 1 and even players for PSG themselves, Rabiot mentioning that victory against Dijon after losing it at the Bernabeu. But this felt like an opportunity to there having them a test, but they didn't really try anything new. It was relatively easy in the end.
Yeah, I think it kind of all worked out very well for them with a sort of a very early goal 10 minutes in, and then Marseille just pretty much showed nothing. I think Emery has experimented a reasonable amount in recent league matches. I suppose the biggest experiment you could say in this one was starting off with Diarra in the defensive role and still keeping Lo Celso in the team a little bit further forward. But I mean, before the match, I would have said they definitely wouldn't have experimented because, you know, rightly or wrongly, that the Classique has been built up into such a big thing, and Marseille, you know, did almost grab that win in the first meeting between the two. So even though PSG are sort of miles ahead in the league, I still think it was kind of an important match for them to win. So yeah, beforehand I would have said that Emery was going to play safe just to make sure he did win, but you know, having gone 2 goals up and Marseille really not showing any signs of even coming close to making a game of it, possibly he could have played around a little bit more. But I think maybe he went more for this is going to be easy, let's all kind of relax and save our legs and save our energy for bigger matches to come.
Yeah, which it's a risky one given that how big the game will be in a couple of weeks, but they were shown to really be worth it. But a couple of things that were maybe minor flashpoints, and it looks maybe a little bit more serious than it was in the end, Rich, that Neymar injury, really. He sort of rolled his ankle a little bit. I think I've done that. Well, I think everyone's done that a couple of times on a five-a-side. Sometimes that can be a little niggle that maybe it feels a little bit funny for a day and then it's fine. Sometimes it blows up a little bit and you've maybe got a weak thing, but obviously sometimes it can be a ligament injury. It looks like it's not going to affect him an enormous amount. They're probably going to keep him out of the game midweek, but he's expected to still be a part of that Real Madrid game. But that was for at least a brief moment in time with him seemingly either in pain or in tears, depending on who you're asking, really, to be fair, while he was on the stretcher. A real worry.
I think it was a worry. I think that there may be cause that the media perhaps maybe made a little bit too much of it. It's Neymar, so he could sneeze and Ligue had put out an article of how this is going to be the downfall of Paris or something like that. But it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad. I've seen one or two people suggest, oh well, Emery should have taken him off earlier. Well, Neymar's Neymar. He just unless he scored 4 goals and assisted another 3, and is coming off in the 90th minute, he just doesn't get substituted. He either doesn't play.
Can I just quickly butt in just to say I've literally just got a news flash from L'Equipe saying that I think he's broken a metatarsal and there's a doubt for the Real Madrid match.
Ooh. Or is that sometimes with L'Equipe, yeah.
I half wonder if this is now going to be a little bit of we've seen it a little with Guardiola in the Premiership of, well, such and such player is definitely going to be out, and lo and behold, now before kick-off they mysteriously make it to the team. So I'm under not too much doubt that he will play a part in that Madrid game. Yes, he's going to miss the Coupe de France game. He should miss the weekend's Ligue 1 fixture as well. He will play a part in that. I'm sure of it, because ultimately it's the game now that will define the rest of PSG's season. For the time being, anyway, until if they make it through to the next round. But it didn't look. It's slow motion, isn't it? As we always say, it's going to look worse, especially going over on your ankle, because it's a fine line between literally just rolling it and it's just a very, very minor sprain to something far, far more serious. I think the way that he went off on a stretcher and clearly upset. I suspect all of that played its part for the media storyline and headlines that this is this major injury problem, and I think PSG will probably now manage that to their advantage in the lead up to the game. But it was really the only major cause for concern for PSG last night.
Yeah, absolutely. The real conflicting reports at the moment, isn't there? I mean, even Sky Sports are saying that he might be out for 3 weeks as well. It could always be mind games in these kind of things because I'm just going to throw it out there. I didn't think it looked that bad. I think the slow motion makes it look a lot worse than it was. And I honestly think as well that they may be playing up the fact that he was quote unquote crying. I think it was probably him more just in pain more than anything and trying to sort of hide that more than anything than trying to cry. But the other interesting little tidbit, at least anyway, for PSG, and it's again probably a little bit of nothing really, Jez, but that was when Kylian Mbappe was substituted. He kind of shook his head. He wasn't very pleased about coming off, but that to me, and I should probably you're thinking the same, that's less of the politics of being angry about being substituted because he feels like he shouldn't be substituted. It's because he wants to play every minute of football, I would assume. Do you think that's been a bit overblown?
Yeah, I don't think there was too much to it. I mean, he hasn't been in the most sparkling of form recently. I suppose he scored a decent goal, and Marseille's defence always looks a little bit there for the taking. But maybe last night more than other times, he probably fancied staying out there and maybe adding to his tally because him and Nolan Roux are in pretty tight race for who's going to finish highest scorer. But I don't have any concerns in general from Mbappe. I think, Mbappe's drop in form is still the kind of form that most players would dream of. And with the service he's still going to get, and the fact that unlike Cavani, he's got a decent relationship, I think, with Neymar, I think he'll be fine. I think it was just a little bit of frustration, but nothing too much. I just think he needs to be slightly careful about being a little bit too distracted by off the pitch things. There's a lot of fuss made about him having dinner with Macron, George Weah, and he got into a spat yesterday and today with Benoit Soukoto, sort of related to that, making comments about all these quaint European footballers pretending that they care so much about Africa, but they're not actually playing for their European nation and all this kind of thing. I just think I'd like him to sort of, really get his head down and just concentrate on the football. But he's such a talented player that I think it would take a lot to sort of really affect his form in any negative way.
Yeah. I think last night was more a case of, he hasn't been playing well of late, but it's a very big game. Probably one of the biggest domestic games PSG will play. He's got an early goal, and he's then hauled off after an hour. I think it's just a minor bit of frustration and annoyance on his part. It doesn't look good for a young player to be shaking his head so visibly and looking so visibly annoyed coming off, and then looking so moody sat on the bench. I'm not in total agreement that is something that we need to be seeing. Because it does come across then of whatever the intentions are that he, whatever he's meaning by doing that, it just comes across that he is frustrated at Emery. It looks like a show of disobedience against Emery, and that's not the presentation that you want to be giving yourself or the club.
I think there was there's no doubt that with the quality of players around him, he's bound to improve in that sense. But there was a point later on, to be fair, it was after Clinton and G just lashed out at Marquinhos and arguably was reasonably lucky to only get a yellow card. But you had Motta, Alves and Neymar sort of trying to, in their own way make peace and, obviously not make peace whatsoever. And you just think with players like that around, and I really do include Neymar in that, the way he plays football can be fun, but I think some of his behaviour on the pitch is pretty nasty. And even with that injury, as two of you were discussing earlier, I do think there's an element of sort of Hollywood and crying wolf to it. With players like that around, you do worry that Neymar could, that Mbappe, sort of behaviour-wise, could be influenced in a negative way rather than a positive one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sheen of being the perfect little schoolboy teacher's pet that we sort of had at Monaco for that 6 months has completely evaporated now, at least anyway, very quickly at least. Let's talk about the visitors then a little bit. And you hit about it a little bit there, Jez, and I want to talk to you about it, Rich, is the couple of flashpoints that really Marseille had. They weren't really particularly great on the night, but they had a couple of moments where it's the tension seemed to get to them, or the annoyance, the frustration. There was a couple of kicks out at Neymar. There's a couple of kicks out at different players, but especially the one within G where he does have a kick out at Marquinhos, and all of a sudden every single player wants a piece of G, and he's pushing everyone away. It's especially if he'd pretty much just come on at that point as well. He was lucky to stay on the pitch, really.
Yeah, I mean, he got a little bit frustrated because as he got tackled, I think Marquinhos sort of gave him a little nudge to the ground as he tried to go past him. He lashed out, shouldn't have lashed out. I think the player that's probably the luckiest of them all is Ocampos. I thought his foul in the first half on Dani Alves, that's red card worthy. He came in over the ball, studs up. On first glance, I was a bit dubious as to is Alves perhaps within this, but you see it on the replay. There's no doubt he comes in over the ball, studs up, sort of just above the ankle of Alves. It was really, really nasty. That should have been a red card. I think Ng's probably was handled just about right. I don't think it was red card worthy. He was just a frustrated man who'd come on and wanted to do something and reignite Marseille from what had been a very tepid performance. Lashing out makes it sound, I think, perhaps far more severe than it really was. It was a bit of, a little flick here. Yeah, a little flick here, a few shoves here, and sort of mouthing off a little bit. But there wasn't anything I didn't feel there was anything that crossed the line from a booking to a red card. But Campos is in the first half. I can't defend that from being anything but a red card.
Absolutely. I think it was more of an orange, wasn't it? You would say maybe for an NG to ring a football cliche, really. But the interesting one for me, Jess, and a lot of people picked this out at the start, before the game even started, is the change that Rudy Garcia decided to make. We'd mentioned how he'd sort of finally molded this team correctly and got a nice bit of balance to the team. And then he takes out one of the real star performers recently in Morgan Sanson and takes much more of a risk of playing Ocampos and Payet in the central area and Tovan and Germain, a very attacking side against the best team in Ligue 1 by a fair way and one of the best teams in Europe. It seemed a strange decision, and it was one they rectified it pretty quickly in terms of having a sub in the first half, but it was a poor decision, and it backfired in a big way, didn't it?
I think he was trying to keep as much as possible to the team that gave PSG such a tough time in the first match between them, and certainly in terms of Ocampos versus Sanson, there must be a kind of an element of PSG don't like it up and sort of thing. Get someone in there. Sanson's not the type who's going to sort of be going in two-footed and that kind of thing. And obviously there's a fine line, and Campos did step over it and possibly was substituted for his own good. But maybe you can see Garcia's thinking in having Campos running around like a madman, worrying players that are going to be thinking about that match against Real Madrid and thinking, maybe that's going to soften them up a little bit and give us half a chance. If it had worked out, then everyone would be saying, well, what a great idea by Garcia. But I think it very much backfired. It didn't work out at all. But I mean, overall, I not for this match, but if Garcia was Lyon manager, they would be completely out of sight. Still in second place to PSG, but I don't think Marseille or Monaco would be close to them. I still I know I get stick for this. I still think this Marseille team is very average, and I think the job that Garcia is doing just to keep them up there. When you see players like Payet and Thauvin that, against really decent opposition, they've just got absolutely nothing to show. I think it's astounding what Garcia has been doing just to get them to be winning week in, week out against all the other teams, just to give them half a chance.
Yeah, I think personally as well, the decision to take out Sanson from that side restricts someone like Thauvin, because Sanson adds that sort of link between the midfield and the attack, and that's, I think, what they really missed last night. They have Sambo and Guisa to try and do a little bit of that, but he's not always going to be that dynamic, especially passing wise in the attacking third, or starting attacks off in that sort of, in PSG's half at least. It really restricted them. I thought Payet was very much a passenger in that middle part of the field, and Campos was a bit too physical, but it just seemed strange to go away from something that had succeeded over the last sort of 5-10 weeks, you would think, that having that consistency, because they're a much different team, I would say, overall, than they were when they drew with Paris Saint-Germain back in last year.
I think, as you said, you want to, against the best opposition, you should want to sort of play your best team. And I don't think there's any doubt that Sanson is amongst their best players, and certainly their most creative. So, yeah, in that sense, I definitely think it was a strange choice.
Yeah, given the consistency that midfield, I think, gave them as well, it very strange and a little bit too risky, really, in the end. On to the Rhone Derby that should have had a jam-packed Sunday, really, of interesting games. And that was a certainly feisty affair, as it always tends to be. There was a little bit of an enjoyable motif, really, from the Lyon fans before the game, poking the finger in one last time, really. But Rich, again, it was a game with Lyon, took the lead, had chances, looked dangerous at times, but slowly faded away in the second half as Saint-Etienne grew and grew and grew, and eventually they gave way, as they tend to do at the moment, Lyon. If you want a gift, go to Lyon, because they'll give it you. They've forgotten how to kill teams off, haven't they?
It's very frustrating to see, because I've lost track of the amount of times now where we've seen a really positive first half performance from Lyon, normally on the score sheet, chances, some really nice attacking football, some really, really positive individual performances. And then second half, something happens, be it they switch off, be it that the opposition just raise their game. I think the frequency that it's happened would indicate that it's more a mental problem for Lyon, that they just fall asleep. They invite teams to come out strong in the second half. And from that, their confidence builds, and all of a sudden you see time and time again that lead that they played so well for in the first half has gone. And it's now a point now where it's going to really, really damage their chances of taking that second spot. I think they're, I can't remember how many points they're behind now, 5, 6, 7, something like that. This time of the season, if you're in this kind of form, it's nigh on impossible to make that up. These are games that, okay, perhaps home against Saint-Etienne, a draw is not the worst result in the world, but it's another performance that we've seen in the last immediate 4 games, and then other times throughout the season. And not to sound like a broken record, but Lyon don't have a plan B. Genesio doesn't have a plan B. I've said it countless times on this show, Twitter, everywhere. The plan A for Lyon looks really, really nice on paper. And when it works, fantastic. Early part of the season, we saw that. It's then the ability to, okay, well, a team have sussed this out. We need to change something. We need to change personnel. We need to change tactics, style of play. And Genesio doesn't seem to have that attribute within him. Therefore, we're finding now that teams can suss out and realise, well, actually, you know what, Lyon are just going to switch off after the break. So providing we don't fall too far behind in the first half, we're going to have 45 minutes where we're going to be on top when they're more tired. We saw it in the game against Lille. We saw it, the possession and shots that they had in the defeat to Rennes the other week, you know, it was ridiculous that they lost that game 2-0. And then this game as well, in a game that they really shouldn't be switching off in against their big local rivals, who, you know, they put in one of their best performances of the season in the reverse fixture. To fall asleep in the 90th minute in that way is unforgivable on the team and Genesio himself.
Yeah, because you think of the talent level that they've got, and they shouldn't be coming unstuck in these kind of games. And what bigger motivation do you need than your bitter rivals? You can see from just the motif how much that victory earlier in the season meant to the fans. But it always felt like that goal was going to come in that second half. It always felt like Lyon were going to switch off for a brief moment. They were allowing Saint-Etienne back into the game, really, and a side that struggled for creativity. They weren't particularly offensive for long periods. They didn't really create much, really, until that goal actually happened. But this, now for Lyon's season, really, just feels like Europa League or bust. When 5 weeks ago, when they beat Paris Saint-Germain, you thought that they were almost guaranteed to get second. Now, they're relying on a cup competition that hopefully they can avoid some big names up until the sort of semi-finals, and then hopefully get a little bit lucky.
It's a very high risk game because there's some very good teams left in the Europa League, and I mean, to the extent that the final is being played at their home ground, you can certainly see why they'd want to go all out for that. But I think it's just become a necessity now, just because it's just bizarre after that, the drop off after that PSG match, where, you know, that they were excellent, they were very good for their win, and just how it's gone wrong since then. In this match this weekend, possibly I would be a little bit more sort of forgiving of them, because, you know, I think Thursday's match was, you know, a really impressive result, going to Villarreal, which isn't an easy place to go to, and getting a win there to get them through to the next round was good. And you know, during the match they had a couple of injuries to contend with. I think Raphael went off injured, Fekir went off injured later on. I think Toussaint was either injured or ill and had to go off at half time. So in this case, there are a couple of mitigating factors, but still, I just, you know, 1-0 up against Saint-Etienne with the sort of mental advantage that they got from slaughtering them earlier in the season, they shouldn't be giving that lead away. But then you can say that about most of the last few matches as well. And I don't. Rich talks about Genesio having a plan B. I think you have to give Gasset a bit of credit for changing Saint-Etienne's formation around, but it's hard not to resist the temptation to put all the blame on Genesio, because, you know, as I said earlier, I really think that Lyon's team and squad is the second best in Ligue 1 at the moment, and all of the players show it in spurts, but Genesio's not getting the best out of them. He's often not getting them to play as a team, and I find it, you know, unless they win the Europa League, I can't see how he's still going to be there at the start of next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a little bit of injury worry there, really, with Fekir coming off as well, with a seemingly slight knee injury. Supposedly he wasn't on a brace or anything like that and didn't need crutches afterwards, so it might just be a little bit of a knock. But I'm just seeing now that Paris Saint-Germain have announced that Neymar has suffered a fractured metatarsal and a sprained ankle, so that sounds like if it is a particularly fractured metatarsal, he might be out of that Real Madrid game now. But we'll keep that in our back pockets, and we'll talk about that possibly near the time now, because that is an interesting one as well. But an opportunity missed, really, then, for Monaco, who obviously knew that Lyon had a big derby game. Marseille had the Le Classique to contend with top of the league, but they ended up with a 3-3 draw, really, and that was without controversy. We'll talk about in the minute, really. But regardless of that, Rich, it's a tough one. Being 3-1 up against a Toulouse side that are struggling this season, you feel like that's the kind of game that Monaco need and should be winning.
It absolutely is, without a doubt. You know, in the run-in now, every coach, every team with a shot at at some like a European place will have penciled in, right, win, we'll 3 points there, 3 points there, 3 points there. This, without a doubt, is one of those games. Toulouse have really been struggling of late. They're struggling to find the net. They're conceding plenty of goals. Monaco are in a 3-1 position going into the final just over 10 minutes. There's absolutely no reason. There's no obvious reason why Monaco should have thrown this away. Really encouraging performance from Ronnie Lopez, who I think has stood out numerous times this season in a sort of quote-unquote Bernardo Silva replacement role, which was never going to be the easiest of labels to take on, but I think he stepped up really, really well. 2 goals from him, 3-1, and things seem to be pretty rosy. And hindsight of the weekend, what 3 points would have done for Monaco, but a contentious penalty decision later, and it comes down to Yaya Sanogo to score a winner. An equaliser 2 minutes from time, which for Toulouse, I suppose, would have felt a bit like a winner.
Yeah, and without controversy is definitely the way to put it, because Leonardo Jardim was very unhappy, really, after the final whistle, just because of the penalty that Toulouse got to get themselves back in the game. And it was a very strange one, really. Sanogo's going for an overhead kick. Glick, whether you think rightly or wrongly, is stepping towards him as if to challenge for a header. Obviously, Sanogo falls over. It's a little bit bumbly, but the referee gives a penalty for that. We've seen free kicks given for high foots in these kind of scenarios more often than not. It was a very bizarre decision, and one that obviously turned the game on its head.
Yeah, I mean, before the match, I thought that Monaco might struggle. Toulouse really gave them a good game in the first match of the season, and Michael Debert has made them a bit harder to beat in recent weeks. But having gone 3-1 up and against a Toulouse team that barely ever scores, yeah, I thought Monaco were going to be quite comfortable from there. The penalty changes everything. Although still, I think Monaco should have had enough to close up shop and keep it to 3-2. But it was an awful decision. You could argue maybe Glick nudges Sanogo, but it's a contact sport. It wasn't the kind of nudge that tipped him off balance or anything like that. I think Sanogo's it didn't affect the fact that he was going to try some ridiculous overhead kick, which he didn't come close to pulling off, and arguably, not arguably, I mean, the referee saved him from embarrassment, and he got a hell of a lot more into the bargain. So I can understand Jardim being furious about the decision, but Toulouse, who barely ever scored 3 goals, the penalty only accounts for 1, so you can't pin it all on the ref at all.
Yeah, I think with any kind of games like this where you are expected to win, and a win would have been massive, really, if you think about it as well, with Monaco with Marseille losing and Lyon ending up drawing as well. It could have made a little bit of a buffer between the Monaco and the other two, and given that they both have to play each other still in a few weeks' time, that it gives them an extra little bit of a cushion, and it's certainly a chance missed, at least anyway. They should be putting teams like Toulouse away. While they can be a tricky customer, if you put 3 past a Toulouse side, who are sometimes a little bit stingy and have been incredibly goal shy this season, you should be putting them away, really, and no excuses even with that penalty. There's a first and a third goal that they could have stopped, really, but managers will always look for something to help alleviate, shall we say, the pressure on some of the players that they get from that. But there was a big game at the bottom of the table, really, this weekend, and it was a massive result for Angers, who had that win against Lille that plunges their opposition into danger. It's chop and change every week, really, with those bottom 2 at the moment, but particularly for the away side, Rich, with them having a bit of poor form. We've mentioned that in the last couple of weeks that some of their draws that they got early in the season are coming back to bite them, and some of those results that they got there were draws early in the season have turned into losses. That was a big win for them.
Absolutely massive. It highlights, I think, mental resolve in its positive and negative light. Angers took the lead sort of midway through the second half. Lille throughout the game had the vast majority of possession, but Angers took the lead, let their heads drop. Former Angers player Pepe gets the equaliser, and you just think, that's a big knock, I think, for Angers to concede that late on, and you think, good on Lille for fighting and not giving up, and heads drop immediately after scoring, and from the kickoff, pretty much, Toko Ekambi goes down the other end of the pitch and gets the winner, and you just think it's a fantastic 3 points for Angers, and a huge time to be securing them against probably their biggest relegation rival, but it's potentially a fatal loss for Lille, to have lost in that manner in a game that they had to win. I struggle to see how that team can recover now. There's a lot of young players in that side who arguably are not perhaps the strongest mentally. They've had a very poor season. To culminate then in this loss, as I say, in the manner that it was, Galtier's got to perform some kind of miracle, I think, to turn this round, because the mood in that Lille camp now is going to be beyond rock bottom. Conversely, Angers can take great positives from this, to have conceded late on, to still fight back and retake the lead and get those 3 points. They now have to look at keeping that positive feeling within the camp going, to push it forward, and as ever with teams in this manner, is utilise that and take it into the next game.
Yeah, especially for the 4 defeats in 5 before that one. It's a massive result for Angers, and it's never really easy, really. I think March looks pretty poor for both teams, but we'll focus on Angers first. They've got Guingamp next, but then there comes Bordeaux and PSG, and then they've got Caen at home as well to finish off the month. But I do want to mention, really, Jesse, one man in particular, and it's not surprising we mention him, really. He's scored 2 again in this game. Absolutely vital to the squad is Karl Toko Ekambi. 13 goals this season. Is there a player more important to their side than he is at the moment?
I don't think so. I mean, on paper, I do think that they've got a nice squad, some really talented players there. They still got the bulk of the defense that was so impressive a couple of seasons ago. They've got Boutel back. They've got some talented midfielders. Fulgini I like a lot. Tate and Capel often sort of pop up with some good finishes. But yeah, it seems like when Toko Ekambi's scoring, they've got a chance. When he doesn't, they don't. I think he's got 45% of their goals this season, and actually I was surprised it wasn't higher than that when I saw that stat. I think these were his first goals in open play actually since December, and yeah, it's probably not that surprising that that's probably the time that their form has really dropped off, while he hasn't been as prolific as the first half of the season. But I think they did a great job making sure that he stayed until the end of the season, and if they stay up, I'm still not 100% sure they will, but if they stay up, it's almost certainly going to be down to him. And the first one was a sort of nod in from about 2 yards, so not going to give him too much credit for that one. But the second one was the winner. Was a fantastic finish, and as Rich said, in view of the context, sort of last minute after just being pegged back, to kind of have the calmness to finish that way with an offside teammate sort of running almost across the line of the shot and the goal, making it even harder. I think that showed that he really is a class player, and yeah, it shouldn't be a one-man team, but I think probably more so than any other team in Ligue 1, that's what they look like at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and he maybe got a tad lucky on one of them at least, anyway. But it's the only problem for Angers is even if he does keep them up, he's definitely going in the summer, and then it's replacing someone like that to try and stay up next season. But it does become more and more worrying for Lille, who are definitely in a relegation fight if they weren't in one already. Rich and like I mentioned, I think March is a bit of a humdrum month for them, really. They got Nice away, which isn't easy. They've got Montpellier at home, who are a stickler of a side at the moment, and then Monaco as well. Then they get those interesting games against Amiens, and then they've got a run against Metz, Toulouse, and Dijon, sort of towards the very end of the season. That might just be the kind of games that keep them up. But that's a gauntlet that they have to run before them, and adding importance to those games is, especially when they're late down. Maybe Metz are possibly already down by the time they face them, so they've got nothing to lose in those kind of games. Maybe Toulouse are still fighting for their lives and maybe in better form. You really have to start worrying for them, don't you?
Absolutely. You know, you look at that run in from now to the end of the season, and you think, where do Lille get their wins? Look at that first and foremost, and you think they're going to be targeting Amiens at home, they're going to be targeting Metz at home, and they might be targeting Dijon at home. I don't see any other games where you could make a really, really strong argument that they'll take 3 points. You know, aside from that, you know, as you say, they've got to play Nice, they've got to play Montpellier, they've got to play Monaco, Bordeaux, Marseille, Saint-Etienne. You know, they may win those. You know, Metz, that run of Metz, Toulouse, Dijon. There's putting up the 3 games leading into the final game of the season, which is the way to Saint-Etienne. You know, they may get them points there, but that may be too late by then. It's still the only thing going in their favour is still just how ridiculously tight it is throughout that, from the bottom all the way up to. I think I tweeted out after the games this weekend that Montpellier in 5th are 11 points off Lyon in 4th and 11 points off Troyes or Lille now in Troyes in 18th. You know, it's ridiculously close, and that could be the only thing I think that can work in Lille's favour, is having someone like Galtier in charge. You know, he's a very experienced Ligue and coach, and the fact that there are going to be a lot of teams who perhaps don't have that Ligue and experience, be it on the pitch or on the sidelines. So I think that's the only positive I think I can give to Lille, is that throughout all their dreadful, torrid form and this really crushing defeat, it's still so close. You know, 1 win and they're out of the relegation zone potentially next weekend. So there's still huge amounts to play for, but they're really running out of games now where they can be confident going in thinking we're going to take all 3 points.
Yeah, it really keeps toing and froing, doesn't it? I mean, we thought that Angers might be down there and other teams might start struggling, but looking at the results, weekend Troyes obviously lost, Metz drew. They were far away from beating Guingamp, which would have really put another stickler up there. But Amiens picked up a win, so they unexpectedly away at Nantes, so they leap up the table and maybe draw Strasbourg a little bit closer because they could only draw. Caen lost, so they're starting to sink maybe slightly closer as well. And then you look at the fixtures next weekend, and Troyes placing PSG, that's almost a write-off for them. Amiens face Rennes, who are in decent form, but Amiens have shown in the last couple of weeks that they can spring a surprise. There's that massive game between Metz and Toulouse as well, which could really be an absolute sinker for Metz, but something that Toulouse can maybe use as a springboard to try and join Saint-Etienne and Dijon, who are teams that maybe feel just about enough safe as it is. And Confe Strasbourg, that's a massive game. If there's a winner in that one, again, that's another team that maybe can feel safe. So it does get more and more interesting the further we go along, really. And there's not, like you say, there's not a thinning of the herd, which makes every team still have a little bit of hope. But every time they get a knock, they start looking at the fixtures ahead and going, there's not many more hopes that we can keep looking forward to if results keep going the wrong way. Let's finish up this week with one of my favourite segments, and that's our Ligue 1 snapshots. And I'll start with you, Jez. I'll what is your Ligue 1 snapshot this week?
I was going to mention the Lyon tifo with the the massive banner, if you want to call it that, of Fekir holding up the T-shirt of the shirt after scoring in that first Saint-Etienne match. But you mentioned that earlier, so I'm just going to mention. I think there were 3 penalties. I mean, there were more than 3 penalties this week, because Kasri scored on as well. But there were 3 penalties, I think, scored by Mollet, Tavares, and Delors. All 3 of them were sort of cracking Kevin Pressman style top corner rockets. I enjoyed watching them this weekend. I thought they were good fun.
Rich, what's your Ligue 1 snapshot?
Mine, we're down to the 3rd tier, to the National. And there was a game this weekend between Lyon's sort of second team, Lyon Duchère, and a Parisian-based team called Entente. And there are 2 goals in that game, which are their goal of the season. You take goal of the, you give goal of the season to both of them if you can. The first scored by Entente. There's a free kick that comes into almost the corner of the penalty area, and the the Entente attacker is sort of backing away from it, and almost as he's falling over, just overhead kicks it into the far top corner. It's a, if you can dig it out, watch it, because this is a remarkable goal. The technique on it, I don't know how much luck was involved, but you watch it back and you just think, how on earth has that gone in? And then the second goal, it's the winner, I think, for Lyon Duchère, was it was sort of akin to the old Paul Scholes volleyed effort from against Wimbledon quite a few seasons ago now. Corner comes in and there's a Lyon Duchère player on the edge of the area and absolutely first time cracks a volley in, as sweetly hit as you could possibly hit a volley into the top corner. I know the Guardian YouTube site have published a little video to show both of them. Do check them out because they are stupendous goals.
Yeah, I mean, that volley one as well, like you say, it is an absolute stunner. The one that it reminds me of is, and I apologise to Aston Villa fans because I was there as well, was a volley for Paul Scholes against Aston Villa where it was straight from a corner into a full volley into the top corner. I was actually in the Aston Villa away end, in the home end. It's easy to get tickets, and I almost left off my seat and had to be pulled down by my dad before we got beat up by a load of Brummies. But I apologise for Aston Villa fans for reminding of that, and then stealing possibly one of their seats as well. But an absolute thunderbolt of a goal. But my favourite Ligue 1 moment of this week, there's 2 really that stand out for me. Number 1 is, I'm surprised you didn't mention it, Jez, and that's, you did briefly earlier on, and that's Nolan Roux finally getting double figures for the first time in his Ligue 1 career. It seems slightly strange that he's never quite reached that total, given how long he's been in the league, how many relatively decent clubs he's played for, at least Lille and Saint-Etienne were at the time when he played for them, at least, but he never really was a prolific goal scorer. But to get that notch nice and early as well in late February, he's still got a few months left. Maybe he can even reach out for the 13, 14, maybe even 15 goal barrier. That'd be a nice little surprise for someone that a lot of people had a lot of hope for in his early career. I remember at Nancy there was high expectations of him, and when he did move on and towards Lille and Saint-Etienne and teams like that, people thought that he was the kind of player that could maybe kick on in his younger years. It never quite happened for him, but it's always nice to have a little mini renaissance, never mind when it comes in. And my other favourite one, I spotted this on the Liga YouTube channel, and very strange moment really at Dijon. It was a bit of a future afternoon, I might think you might say. Number 1, the DeLorean from Black to the Future was in the car park before the game for fans to have a little bit of a look out. And the ceremonial kickoff was done by a small robot that proceeded to dab after taking the kickoff, which seemed to sum up Dijon, really, who are home warriors at the moment. Really, 7 wins out of 8. There's not many better than that, really, in Liga. And we do want to finish. I should have brought this up earlier, really, during our Monaco chat, but there was a question by one of our fans. And if you do have questions, please do tweet our main account. They tend to send them my way, at least anyway. If not, if you want as well, send them my way at Nathan J. Staples on Twitter. Send me questions in. I always love to hear from yourselves and what we can add. What our friend Milan Jar wants to talk about is Jardim's obsession with Andrea Raggi, really. He mentions he's awful and a liability as a centre-back and even worse as a left-back, and I would, to some degree, concur. But Rich, he, at least by Jardim, is seen as maybe the old head, but Mr. Reliable in a way, isn't he?
I would argue that I love him. I think he's absolutely brilliant. He's the player that's... There's not many that are there from the sort of quote-unquote good old days of Monaco before they became to this new project that everyone knows now. But he is, as you say, he's just reliable. You know, he's not a fantastic defender. I don't think anyone proclaims that he is, but he's a reliable player. He's an experienced player. And he'll, you know, anywhere along that back line, he'll slot in and he'll do a job. He's not going to be a world beater. Never has, never will be. But, you know, I think he's great. I really do. And I you know, long may he continue. Long may he continue with Monaco.
Jez, are you in a Raggi corner, or are you maybe a little bit more frosty on him?
A little bit more frosty than Rich, apparently. Yeah. I think, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Rich said. I think he's just kind of reliable in the sense that he can play anywhere across that back four. So, you know, if they do have injuries or lack of form or anything, you can, you know, he's able to slot into any of those positions and do a reasonable job, not necessarily a world-class job, but a reasonable job. He's obviously, you know, a very good leader on the pitch, can even, as he did a couple of weeks ago, I think, pop up with a goal. He's, you know, set pieces, he can be pretty useful at both ends. He's not necessarily going to be the quickest at kind of coming back and facing speedy wingers, but he's still sort of a strong, intimidating presence on the pitch. So I can understand why he's very valued as a squad player. But yeah, I'm not sure Monaco are going to be winning too many Champions Leagues with him starting. But
he did play a very important role in that run to the semi-finals last season. You know, he was called upon in those knockout round games time and time again, and I just felt that, you know what, he stepped up and performed, and he's he's dependable, providing you're not setting the bar too high. If that's not damning with fake praise, but I just, you know, he's a very good, okay player.
You look at the fullbacks of basically any of the top four teams, and he's not, you know, you certainly couldn't say that he's completely out of place compared to any of them. You know, even at PSG, you know, arguably the four sort of main squad fullbacks, none of them are real world beaters. Alves was in his day, but I really don't think he is anymore. So, you know, he's really not that far off.
So basically what we're saying, he's the very best of the absolute average middle mean score, really, from the sounds of things. And I'm a little bit concerned that, personally, that Monaco aren't investing in another defender or someone to play as cover, because they've got Raggi. He's never injured. He's always there. He can fill in any gap. They don't want to add another defender, because why would they ever need to? The bold Italian is always there and ready for action as always. So that'll do for this week on Dig Up for Football News Fair. My thanks to Rich, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.